issues as regards student unionism, there are also issues too that we also need to address. Because I mean, I am also a product of the struggle. I mean, I was privileged to have been involved in student unionism at some point of my stay in the university. So I can tell you that, I mean, unionism within the realms of the current realities we face in this country will play a very vital role. And so it is important, I mean, very necessary that the student leadership structure should be speaking in one voice. It is something.
Did they actually speak in one voice?
Well, somehow, I think in recent times, I mean, with the recent election they conducted, it seems to me as though there is.
Okay, so you people were not speaking in one voice.
No, not
because a lot of people say student unionism, most of them are the problems of that. They're even more of the bone of contention that we should be looking at. So, do you agree with that?
Yeah. So when I mean as it is currently, I mean the new leadership of NANS. I mean, I think that in Nigeria we always have a situation where when the NANS leadership come on board, they seem to be working towards a direction that the students expect. I think somehow, some way, I mean, they lose focus. But currently, currently, I think that with the new leadership that we have, I mean, the election was conducted recently. There seemed to be that sense of unity amongst them. I mean, we saw the demonstration at the Lagos International Airport. I mean, it spoke volume. And then a few days later, we saw a court judgment where, of course, the court mandated ASUU to call off the strike.
Albert Einstein, German-born theoretical physicist, widely acknowledged to be one of the greatest and most influential physicists of all time, once said, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results." Very popular one. All right, now, let's see how that quote relates to what we'll be discussing tonight. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We're reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. Now, following the unresolved and prolonged industrial dispute between the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, and its employer, the federal government, the latter filed an application dragging ASUU before the National Industrial Court of Nigeria, NICN. The move appeared to be the last resort to be employed by the federal government in a bid to end one of the longest strike actions embarked upon by Nigeria's university lecturers. Similarly, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, and 5 university students have sued President Muhammadu Buhari before the National Industrial Court, seeking an order to compel the federal government to honor the agreement it reached with ASUU. SERAP and the students asked the court to order the government to implement forthwith the terms of the renegotiated 2009 agreement and the 2020 Memorandum of Action in order to put an end to the strike action and desist from further violation of the rights of Nigerian students to quality education. Recall that ASUU members have been on strike since February 14, 2022, and all negotiations avenue to end the strike proved abortive as the union insisted on the renegotiation of 2009 agreement and the implementation of university transparency and accountability solutions, that's UTAS, and allowances, among other demands that bordered on refurbishment of the Nigerian universities. So, as Nigeria celebrates 62 years of independence from British rule, we'll fix our gaze today on how far and how well our education sector is doing with our guest on the show today. He is Etaba Agbor. And remember, at the end of the program, we should be able to answer that question that at 62, are we truly independent? That's in a moment. Join us again. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you're right on time for the interview. Our guest on the show tonight is Etaba Agbor. He is a public affairs analyst. So we'll be discussing Nigeria at 62 as we'll be looking at the education sector, and we would also talk about the ASUU federal government's tussle. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. All right, now let's go straight to our conversation for tonight. Nigeria at 62, looking back at her education sector, how far would you say we're doing? Would you actually say that we are independent enough and therefore we have good reasons to celebrate or commemorate this anniversary?
Well, thank you very much. So on Nigeria's independence, bearing in mind the educational sector, I think there's a whole lot of discussion we need to have on that. Of course, bearing in mind the fact that our educational sector is one that over time we've had one or two hitches here and there. I mean, we've seen situations as it is currently, the ASU strike and issues incidental thereto. It tells you a lot about how government needs to do more when it comes to the educational sector. But intellectually speaking, I think we have reasons to celebrate because as a country, Nigeria still stands out as one country out there that produces good heads when it comes to intellectualism. You still see Nigerians doing so well in any given field of endeavor that they find themselves within Nigeria and even outside Nigeria. Nigerians are still able to compete favorably with their counterparts out there. So it tells you how, I mean, intellectually, just like I said, there's a whole lot that we can celebrate for our dear country, Nigeria. But then institutionally speaking, I mean, when you're looking at the structures in place to ensure that people have access to quality education, the structures in place to ensure that there's a conducive environment for learning for our dear country people, those are the places where we have one or two hitches. But I mean, intellectually, I'll say it over and over again, there's a whole lot to celebrate for our dear country. It's just unfortunate that institutionally speaking, we have hitches, as I've said, that we need to, as a matter of fact, take cognizance of and, of course, take them seriously for the purpose of making our country to move forward from where it is.
So who exactly is the challenge here? Because you said we institutionally wise, we're not doing very well. So who exactly is hampering the effort of the other person? All
right, well, I think currently the way it is, it all boils down to government. I mean, the responsibility of government is for the purpose of tackling challenges head on. And so when we have issues as regards the educational sector, there's no other person we can run to, it's government. Because the primary responsibility of government, most especially in a competitive world as ours, is to ensure that the educational sector is given topmost priority in its activities. And so if you look at it, bearing in mind the current realities we are facing in our country, you realize that government has a whole lot to do when it comes to tackling.
But the same government, you have like President Muhammadu Buhari recently, when he went to New York during the UNGA summit, he actually stated that we are doing very good. And then with regards to literacy, digital literacy and skills, he said Nigeria is doing like very, very well. But now you're saying that it's a different kettle of fish. So is it that we go outside there and portray something else when there's something else happening right here?
Well, like I said, I think when it comes to the intellectual base, just like I said, Nigeria has a whole lot to hit his hand on his chest and be glad for. And of course, bearing in mind President Muhammadu Buhari's speech at the international level, I think that statement, somehow you can say that, I mean, as president of the country, one would not expect him to go out there and tell leaders of the world that, oh, Nigeria is not doing so well. I mean, he has a responsibility to ensure that our country has a very nice face, a good face, a befitting face at the international level. And so, but when we have to interrogate these issues internally...
So those are all just PR?
Well, if you choose to call it that way, fine.
All right, then now, so let's talk about the federal government and ASU strike, which has actually been there for decades, in fact, centuries. Now, in a recent interview, that was granted by Governor Yahaya Bello, right, he of Kogi State, he actually stated, he was quoted as stating that, let me take that quote from here. He said, saboteurs within the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari were responsible for the ongoing industrial action embarked upon by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU. And he said that the industrial action has been politicized by some disgruntled elites. Do you agree with that quote?
Well, first, I'll bear in mind that, I mean, Governor Yahaya Bello is a critical stakeholder for as long as today's government is concerned. And so one would not expect him to say anything that is not in any way in line with the expectations of today's government. But I mean, when allegations such as that come up as to the fact that, I mean, ASU and their activities have been politicized, I mean, we know of a fact that when the activities of trade union are expected not to be political, they're expected not to be political in their activities, not even to say that they are going on strike for political reasons. I mean, our laws don't allow for such situations anyways. But I mean, if he's alleging that there are saboteurs in government who have now taken advantage of the strike to now somehow fight the government, I mean, those are, for me, those will be political allegations anyways, because I think that the concerns of ASU over time have been concerns as regards the working conditions of our lecturers and the state of our educational sector. I mean, the infrastructural facilities in the universities where students go to study. And so if government, as we have today, a member of the government, a critical member of the government like Yaya Bello is coming out to say they are saboteurs, I mean, those are issues for them to sort out internally within the ranks of government. But when it comes to addressing the cardinal issues as regards the educational sector, which are currently being advanced by ASU, I think that the government has a responsibility to ensure that they give a listening ear. I mean, when I mean listening ear, it's not just saying you're just going to a meeting with us. I mean, beyond going into a meeting with us, so trying to see how they can reach a common ground and, of course, find a lasting solution to the issues. Because
so in all of this, who do you actually think that could be, that actually has more fault in here?
Well, I think from the reports we have on ground, ASU is saying that, of course, they've had some set of meetings with the government. I think the issue here is an issue that borders on trust and, of course, the ability to implement what has been agreed as at the end of the day, because we've seen over time how, I mean, governments have always taken steps to see how they can reach certain agreements with ASU. But I mean, whether or not they honor this agreement is always the bone of contention. And so I think that is an issue that today is playing out, because ASU on their part, I think they need some form of commitment from the government, some form of, I mean, assurance from the government that, I mean, beyond paperwork in terms of agreements, there should be that bodily move towards ensuring that they implement the terms of the agreement. So, I mean, government has a whole lot to do, like I've said earlier on. And, I mean, I think as it is today currently, if government does more than what it is doing currently by merely going into, I mean, meetings with us without necessarily taking steps to implement some of the agreements they've reached, I think this will help us go a long way to see how the strike can be called off as students will go back to school.
Now, because you mentioned students, a lot of people have said even some of this unionism, especially school unionism, the NANS and all the after, you have some people who don't even look like students, but then yet they're at the helm of affair in NANS. Now, I remember seeing a particular report saying that the protest that was held in Lagos, in the NANS protest that was held in Lagos, the Abuja chapter actually denounced it and said they don't know anything about that one. So now, is it having fractions between even the student unionism, isn't that also a problem that you should start thinking of aside the federal government ASU strike?
Well, I think that issues as regards student unionism, there are also issues too that we also need to address. Because I mean, I am also a product of the struggle. I mean, I was privileged to have been involved in student unionism at some point of my stay in the university. So I can tell you that, I mean, unionism within the realms of the current realities we face in this country will play a very vital role. And so it is important, I mean, very necessary that the student leadership structure should be speaking in one voice. It is something.
Did they actually speak in one voice?
Well, somehow, I think in recent times, I mean, with the recent election they conducted, it seems to me as though there is.
Okay, so you people were not speaking in one voice.
No, not
because a lot of people say student unionism, most of them are the problems of that they're even more of the bone of contention that we should be looking at. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, so when I mean as it is currently, I mean the new leadership of NANS. I mean, I think that in Nigeria we always have a situation where when the NANS leadership come on board, they seem to be working towards a direction that the students expect. I think somehow, some way, I mean, they lose focus. But currently, currently, I think that with the new leadership that we have, I mean, the election was conducted recently. There seemed to be that sense of unity amongst them. I mean, we saw the demonstration at the Lagos International Airport. I mean, it spoke volume. And then a few days later, we saw a court judgment where, of course, the court mandated ASU to call off the strike. And the students came up, although they applauded the the judgment of the court. But I mean, there was a strong resolve amongst them that, I mean, in the event that, I mean, the strike still lingers, that the protests they are going to engage in, the answers may even be a joke as compared to
so that's so we're actually going to talk about that later on the show. Now, according to Femi Falana, human rights lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, he said that the National Industrial Court does not have the jurisdiction to rule on the case between the federal government and the Academic Staff Union of Universities, that's ASU. And then he stated that this is the first time that such a case of such nature would be brought before the industrial court. And he also stated that due process was not considered and taken by the federal government before filing the case to the industrial court. I'm going to take some of the things that he stated. He was quoted as saying that this is the first time in history of the court that we have been told that the minister can refer a case to the National Industrial Court without going through the Industrial Arbitration Panel, AIP, because the NIC, that's the National Industrial Court, under the current labor law regime in Nigeria, is an appellate chamber of the AIP. So it is an appellate court. It is only when individuals are sacked that they want to challenge your employer, and they are intra or inter-union. There must be mediation, conciliation rather, and arbitration under the law. So he further stated that it was wrong to approach the court. We tried to explain to the court, and the court said they would look at that later. The court so found that this is a trade dispute and that there was no reference to the AIP, but the court in its wisdom decided to intervene. Why do you think that the court decided to intervene even after all of this explanation? Because I know that you have a background in law, so you should be able to help us break this down, especially for those who don't understand the legal processes. Break this down into bits and pieces.
Well, when it comes to the court intervening, let me say that the court does not just wake up suo motu and decide to intervene in situations. I mean, when matters go before the court, just like we have, parties must make their cases known to the court. It is based on the arguments that are made before the court that the court will finally give a judgment. And so, bearing in mind the current situation on ground, I have always said it, that, I mean, before the court woke up to, grant an order saying that ASU should call off the strike, it wouldn't have been that the court just suo motu on its own decided that ASU should call off the strike. There were arguments. I mean, we saw in reports, of course, what transpired in court, arguments from the government side and, of course, responses on the part of ASU. So it tells you a whole lot how the decision of the court was influenced by arguments made by both parties in court. But as regards issues of due process, I think that our learned senior advocate, who has over time distinguished himself in legal practice, has the opportunity to still, canvass all of his arguments before the court, because as we speak, the matter is in court. And so there are little restraints as to how, we should be able to make certain comments as regards matters that are already in court. But, his concerns are valid. They make a whole lot of sense, of course, considering it in the light of due process that ought to be followed before the National Industrial Court will exercise jurisdiction over trade dispute. But like I said, the matter is before the court, and we trust that, the court, being an impartial arbiter, will be able to listen to both sides, and at the end of the day, guided by its wisdom and sound principles of law, give a judgment that reflects the position of our laws. So we already know that, even as regards the order that was granted by the National Industrial Court that the ASU should call off the strike, ASU had already exercised its right of appeal. And of course, I think there's also an application for stay of execution of judgment. And the implication of that is that ASU is willing to challenge the decision of the Industrial Court at the Court of Appeal. And of course,
so that means you still have a long process to go.
Yeah.
Aside the federal government ASU strike, you still have, they might decide to even appeal on the judgment from the industrial court?
Yes. No, they have. They've already filed the notice of appeal and they applied for...
so we're not dealing with ASU and federal government alone. We're still dealing with ASU and the industrial court. Is that what it means?
No. Now, the appeal, let me explain. The appeal is against the decision of the industrial court, but it's still on the dispute between the federal government and ASU. So it's more like saying that, the industrial court has given a judgment. Now, because ASU is dissatisfied with the judgment, they have a right of appeal. So they've gone on appeal, filed a notice of appeal, and of course, because there is a judgment, and in order to ensure that that judgment is not enforced, they also have to apply for what is known as a stay of execution, which they have done. And so as it is, we are waiting for the situation with the appeal as they are filed on the ruling of the National Industrial Court. It's still the dispute between the federal government and ASU. But beyond all of the issues in court, I think there are other very pressing issues we need to interrogate, because personally, I do not in any way applaud the fact that the government went to court on this issue. Yes, I do not. But I mean, I think that should be a discussion for another day.
I think it has to be a discussion for that, because I hear people always saying that there are other ways to have settled this, but going to the court will actually make it more prolonged. But we'll definitely touch on that. But now, let's understand, if there are due processes before you get to the industrial court, like the learned Silk had actually talked about, saying that it's actually the first time that they take such cases, such trade dispute to the industrial court. So there are processes. So if there are these processes, you should expect that the NIC should know, and then probably, and there are ways where you can actually say, no, if this has been brought to me, it means that you've not followed the due process. So go back and follow the due process before returning back to me. And there are windows for such.
Yeah. All right. Actually, issues like this on due process, there are issues that falls within the jurisdictional competence of the court when you look at whether or not the court has jurisdiction to hear such a matter. Because our laws stipulate that before a matter goes to court, of course, it must be that you have followed due process of law before you set the matter in court. So in instances where due process has not been followed before a matter is commenced in court, you've not fulfilled the condition precedent to the exercise of jurisdiction.
And so what happens?
Yes. So what happens is that as an aggrieved party, you can challenge the decision of the court. And of course, in some instances, the court may suo motu, dismiss the suit for want of jurisdiction. But the reality is that once the court, in that instance, once the condition precedent to the exercise of jurisdiction has not been followed, and the reality will be that no matter how beautifully conducted the proceedings before the court are, at the end of the day, it will amount to a nullity, because it's more like saying that the pathway to doing something has not been followed. And so even if you jump it and later the court sits, no matter how well the court conducts its proceedings, no matter how beautifully conducted the proceedings are, it will amount to a nullity. So in all of this, I think that because of the way our judicial system is positioned, in such a way that, when the National Industrial Court gives a judgment, the Court of Appeal is still there to, sit and hear an appeal from the decision of the National Industrial Court. Both parties, in different instances, will always have the opportunity to, exercise their right of appeal. And we hope that in all of this, there are strong arguments that reflect the true position of our law, because we know, as a matter of fact, that the court will definitely be guided by its wisdom and judgment based on sound principles of law and what to do.
Sound principles of law. We'll get back to that. I like that part, that statement. Now, the judge in NIC, that's Justice Polycarp Hammond, granted the federal government's application for an interlocutory injunction to restrain ASU from continuing with the strike, which they say they will appeal. They have appealed, rather. But then, just like ASU president had stated, I'm sure that's where you said earlier, and then I said we're going to touch on that. He stated that, how would you ask a lecturer to go back to teach the students when they are not physically fit to do so, or when they feel like their grievances have not been sorted out? So is it morally, is it legally, and in fact otherwise, right to force or compel an employee to work? And how much will that actually affect the quality of what they will deliver or reel out afterwards? If you keep having these complaints, we keep having these complaints of universities or tertiary institutions churning out half-baked graduates who are unemployable.
Thank you very much. Well, I think this issue borders on the proper mode of settling this dispute that the government would have explored. And so, if you ask me, I think that because the nature of the issue is one that borders on a collective agreement between the government and members of ASU, government should have explored more of the ADR system, that's alternative dispute resolution, which of course will allow them the opportunity to properly negotiate the terms of the agreement and see how they can reach a common ground. Because over time, I think this has been the issue. The fact that, agreements will be reached, and at the end of the day, government doesn't honor those agreements. So government needed to do more when it comes to engagement with ASU. We've seen the areas of disagreement between the both parties, while ASU is saying that, okay, let us do away with the IPPIS system and go with the University Teachers Accountability System, and also trying to see how they can improve on the salaries of the lecturers in school and the learning conditions. I mean, these are things that, I mean, when they come to a negotiation table with clean hearts, because I think that is where the issue has always been. The fact that, I mean, there's this cunning attitude when
from whose part?
Yeah, from the government actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's almost as if, I mean, you go to a place, you do negotiations that at the end of the day, you yourself, you know you won't honor them. Because we've seen in terms of history how over time these agreements will be reached, and at the end of the day, there's no form of implementation on the part of government. So the government needed to do more. The government needs to do more. I won't say needed because, I mean, they still need to do more with the current realities on ground. They need to do more with engaging ASU on some of these demands they are making. And of course, putting out a strong implementation mechanism, because I think that when government takes steps to see how they can implement one or two of those demands, it shows from the body language that yes, government is committed to, I mean, honoring any form of agreement that they've reached. But when, I mean, they go to the negotiation table, first there's no agreement in the first place, talk less of even implementing it. And then the next thing we hear that government is going to...
So why do you actually think that they decided to jump and then go straight to the court?
Well, I am of the view, I mean, I'm still of the view that, I mean, going to court, like I said, is almost like running away from the primary responsibility of settling the dispute with ASU. Because you're going to court to tell the court, please, compel these persons to call off the strike. Let the court order them to call off the strike. I mean, when you know, as a matter of fact, that, I mean, these persons, they've been agitations as to the condition of their service in school, how the educational system is one that is not in any way being properly funded by the government. And then you're now forcing those same set of persons to go back to school. I mean, the reality is that, I mean, you're telling a lecturer who has been at home for over seven months, yes, and then most of them without pay. I mean, if you even have access to some of them, you realize that, I mean, they've had to go through a whole lot when it comes to meeting with the economic realities of our country. Then you're forcing them now to go back to class. It ultimately means that, I mean, when they get to class, you're not even sure if these persons are even mentally stable in the first place. I mean, for my school, for my former school, for example, my alma mater, University of Calabar, where you go, you see so many posters of lecturers who, over time, were diseased. It tells you a whole lot about what these persons are going through. So we are not saying that, oh, government can be able to do everything they are asking for, but I mean, let there be that demonstration of sincerity, let there be that demonstration of willingness to give a listening ear to their demands. I mean, it will go a long way to further give them that assurance that they would necessarily get value for what they are doing in class, that is lecturing. So they should be able to get that assurance in terms of the fact that they themselves who are going to lecture, they will be paid, I mean, what they deserve. And so when you force them back to class, like the ASU president said, when they get to class, they will still determine what they
and then the students are the ones that will suffer
what they are
most.
going to teach the students. So in the end of the day, you realize that students may end up not even getting the educational value of what they should be able to get from our system. They go there, and then lecturers are not even willing in the first place to teach, talk less of even teaching them what should necessarily add more value to their intellectual competence. So these are a whole lot of issues that, I mean, government has to take into consideration and try to see how, as much as possible, there's a balanced negotiation, there's a strong demonstration of willingness on their part to see how the concerns of the lecturers are given a listening ear to, so that at the end of the day, our students who are the ones who are even suffering the most from all of this crisis can go back to classes and see how they can make a headway with their lives.
Now, talking about students who are even suffering most in this crisis, now a lot of them, I've actually seen some people who said, please, I'm not ready to go back to school. I prefer to keep selling my recharge card. Or some will say, I prefer to keep doing my business and all. But we'll talk about that later. Now, you talked about pay. And seeing that the applicants, they're also praying that the court for an order mandating the defendants and their agents to immediately release and pay all the withheld and outstanding allowances and other emoluments, both for the period and outside the period of the current strike action, to all members of ASU. But then the federal government is insisting that no work, no pay. So how do you actually resolve that part?
I think all of these issues, just like I said, I see part of what the government needs to be on the round table to discuss, to have this understanding with members of the ASU. Because for as long as there are disagreements, ASU is saying pay, government is saying I won't pay you because you didn't go to work. It tells you how there's no sense of understanding between the both of them. And so in all of this, it still boils down to them going back to the negotiation table.
So the negotiation table, should you actually have, since you didn't work for 7 months, don't worry, I'll pay you fully. Because some other persons have actually argued and said, if you don't work, if I'm a private owner of a particular business, if you don't work for 2 days, you should be counting by the hour. So if you don't even work for XYZ hours, it means I shouldn't pay you for XYZ hours, because some people will actually argue and say, after all, that's how they do in advanced countries. So why are we different? So do you agree that it is okay to pay them, let them come back, and then you pay them for the 7 months that they've not worked? Or are you saying that they should not be paid? Which part are you on?
Well, I think with the realities on ground, they should be paid. Because I think this question borders on whether or not government has the capacity to pay them for this period that they've not worked. I mean, this the government we are talking about today, government who has
the government that are not printing money. After they said they're broke.
I know,
at some point.
I know they are broke, but I mean, it's still under this government. We saw Nigerian government donating fleets of cars to another country. So it tells you a whole lot. I mean, these issues borders on the priority of our government and what it is like on the scale of preference when it has to do with education. I mean, education is something that every government should prioritize. And so I think that concerns such as this, especially when it has to do with those who are directly responsible for what our students get in class, government should be able to give a listening ear. Somehow, government may not be able to pay the whole 7 months. But like I said, negotiation will give them the opportunity to say, okay, fine. It's even possible that when they go back to the negotiation table, you see that they may now reach certain agreement at the fact that, okay, we can't pay 7 months. Can we give you 5 months? Can we give you 6, 4, something lesser? These are all opportunities you get at the negotiation table. But I mean, if they continue with the current situation as to, I mean, going to court to compel ASUU to call off the strike, I mean, what is going to be the reality, I think, is much more disastrous.
Is it more like a subordinate, superior kind of relationship right now? Like, I am your boss, so you must do what I say. That
is what is almost becoming like. I mean, government is more like the employer in this case. I mean, lecturers are the employees. I mean, most times in labor relations, they tell you it's a master and servant relationship. It's almost like that. But I mean, like I said, considering what is at stake, the future of our young persons in this country, I mean, government should be able to keep away certain things and see how they can have quality negotiation. My concern in this discussion is on quality negotiation, trying to see how a common ground will be reached, because in all of this, I think the major persons who should be put into consideration are the students who are suffering the larger part of all of these things. Students who have been at home for over 7 months, they've not had access to education. I mean, their future is at stake. I mean, for those who have even lost students this year, the ones who are even in final year have lost the opportunity in the Nigerian law school, because, I mean, law school has opened opportunity for application, but, I mean, they've not met the requirements, so they can't even go. So there are just too many realities that the government needs to wake up to and see how this strike should be called off. ASUU's concerns should be critically and well addressed, so that, I mean, students go back to class.
That's where we're going to start from the law student, how they will fit in. But let's go on this quick break, and when we return, we'll definitely continue with this conversation. I'll see you shortly.
You make your plans, set out your goals and aspirations, and in the end of the day, ASUU comes to tell you, ASUU strike just happens to you, and you are found in nowhere, sitting at home for 1, 2, 3, even up to 7 months. And then, I mean, it's tragic. It's a very devastating situation.
I mean,
speaking from a background of somebody who also had to suffer the same. I suffered the same thing when I was in school. And
is there any Nigerian student that didn't actually suffer one ASUU strike or the other?
I was even joking with one of the students some days back when, I mean, a friend of mine, he was complaining ASUU strike. I just had to tease the person, and I said, "How many strikes have you done?"
Oh. At some point, we'll just start counting how many. You have just done only 7 months. Oh God!
I was like, if you've done just one, I think you are not ready for graduation yet, because it's almost becoming like the number of ASUU strikes you've done would determine when you're going to graduate. That is a sad reality, but I mean, as much as I was joking about it, but when we begin to examine these things critically, it doesn't in any way tell a good story about what our educational system presents for our young persons who aspire to become greater persons in future. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, as much as we agree that these opportunities, some students, I mean, some some students have capitalized on it to, develop their skills in other things. The vast majority of others who do not even have anything to do at this point. Some of them have even resorted to criminality.
Exactly. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. If you just joined us, you missed out on a lot, but then you can still join in the conversation. So our guest on the show tonight is Etaba Agbor. He is a public affairs analyst. Now, before we went on that break, we were talking about quite a lot of things, and then we stopped at the Nigerian law school students. Now, those are who are supposed to go to law school, rather. Now, how much will this actually affect them? Because now you have private universities, they're still up and running. Some other universities that does not have any kind of affiliation with ASU, they're still up and running. So does it mean that they would allow those people to move, and then those who are with the government university would have to wait? How would they sort that out?
Well, I think the current reality on ground is that because of the requirement that before you go to law school, you must have done 5 years in the Nigerian university where, you take on the necessary courses that qualifies you for the Bar 2 program. The current final year students who have not, most of them haven't even finished their first semester. They are not qualified. So the implication now is that, they can't even go to the Nigerian law school. So you now have a situation where some schools resort to, sending backlog students, because some universities have backlog students who are piled up. So they now resort to sending them. Meanwhile, those who ordinarily should have been given the opportunity to go to law school, they can't because they do not qualify. And so for the private schools too, I think some of them too also have backlog situations. Okay. But if they have students who have met the requirements for admission into the Bar 2 program, definitely they will go to the Nigerian law school. But the reality now is that the students in the public universities are the ones who are even suffering the most now, just like I've told you. Because you find out that because of the ASU strike, those of them who have been in their final years for how many years, it's even running into a year or more, those who have been in final year, they can't even go nowhere. Even those who are coming after them, they are still stuck where they are. So there's no progress.
So it doesn't mean that they will just jump pack all of them together and send them to law school?
No, they won't. Because like I said, the ones who are still in final year, they've not met the full requirement.
Okay.
They are not done. So most schools, like I said, are now resorting to sending backlog students. Yes, students who had 1 or 2 issues and they could not go to law school, or some who resorted to going for their youth service before the law school. Those are the ones they are now given the opportunity to go to law school. But the reality is that those who naturally and statutorily were expecting that they will be in law school this year, they've lost the opportunity. Students can no longer even calculate their lives and say, okay, so yeah, this is what I want to do, this is where I hope to be. You make your plans, set out your goals and aspirations, and in the end of the day, ASU comes to tell you, ASU's strike just happens to you, and you are found in nowhere, sitting at home for 1, 2, 3, even up to 7 months. And then, it's tragic. It's a very devastating situation.
I can imagine.
Speaking from a background of somebody who also had to suffer the same. I suffered the same thing when I was in school. And
is there any Nigerian student that didn't actually suffer one ASU strike or the other?
I was even joking with one of the students some days back when, a friend of mine, he was complaining ASU strike. I just had to tease the person, and I said, "How many strikes have you done?"
Oh. At some point, we'll just start counting how many. You have just done only 7 months. Oh God!
I was like, if you've done just one, I think you are not ready for graduation yet, because it's almost becoming like the number of ASU strikes you've done would determine when you're going to graduate. That is a sad reality. But as much as I was joking about it, but when we begin to examine these things critically, it doesn't in any way tell a good story about what our educational system presents for our young persons who aspire to become greater persons in future. It doesn't. As much as we agree that these opportunities, some students, some students have capitalized on it to, develop their skills in other things. The vast majority of others who do not even have anything to do at this point. Some of them have even resorted to criminality.
Exactly.
And so I think that, being in school is an opportunity for them most times to get busy with their academic work, to get busy with, making quality friendships that will ultimately lead them to,
you never know how much university or how much schools actually help a lot of people to solve some. So you have some people that will say, oh, I can't even wait for ASU to just call off their strike. Let me just go to school. Yeah. Some people are not even interested in staying at home anymore. They just want to leave home and then go to school. Yeah. So you don't know how much those of these has actually helped. Now, seeing that various governments have come and gone, And yet this ASU federal government quagmire has refused to go with these administrations. Because I'm actually wondering, like we've stated, a lot of there are no, you can count how many Nigerian students will tell you that yes, I have gone through incessant strikes. And then you find out that none of them will tell you that no, I have not, especially public school students. So it means that one side always renege on the agreement, and like you said, the federal government, they are always found wanting in that regard, and yet the government, they say, is continuous. Now for this, after 7 months of strike by the union, that's ASU, to press home the demand for improved funding for universities and the review of salaries for their lecturers, among other issues, and the federal government still went to court challenging the action. I'm wondering, who is supposed to even sue each other at this point? Is it the federal government that's supposed to sue ASU, or the other way around? Well,
on the issue of who is supposed to sue, now, even if anybody wants to go to court, it shouldn't be the government. It's more like saying I'm holding the yam and the knife. Then after killing you, I'm still carrying the yam somewhere to still continuously deal with it. I mean, the government is in a better position to handle these issues. And like I said, the concerns today and the body language of the government towards the strike is a leadership concern. It's a leadership. It tests the leadership capacity of the current administration, because beyond going to court, I mean, the government should be able to demonstrate a strong sense of leadership by going into strong negotiation. But it has been there.
Various governments have still seen federal government tussle.
Yeah. Now, I think why somehow we say this situation is even worse for the current government is because, I mean, we had instances where the current government back in 2014 during the campaigns and all, I mean, I think part of the promises made by the current government, they capitalized on the ASU strike to campaign. I mean, it tells you a whole lot about how, I mean, some of these challenges becomes a point of campaign for our government, and then when they get to office, I mean, little or nothing is done about tackling those challenges, because we're a government that was at the forefront of criticizing the former government on what they were not doing right in terms of, I mean, tackling issues as to ASU strike. I mean, the expectations of Nigerians were a little bit high. They were high. I mean, when the government comes and tells you, okay, part of the programs we have and what we hope to actualize when voted into power is that we will ensure that ASU strike is no longer the thing, is now a thing of the past. Then when they come on board, we still see that the reality becomes even worse than what used to be the situation before this time. I mean, so the expectations have been high. They've been high from day one. And so with the situation that the strike has lingered up to 7 months, I mean, the government shouldn't have resorted to going to court. They should have, I mean, shown their leadership capacity at this particular trying time when, of course, like I said, the future of our younger ones is at stake. So they should have done more than going to court. What are they going to court? Now they've gone to court. In the end of the court, they gave a ruling on the interlocutory application before the court that ASU should call off the strike. Now the court says, okay, call off the strike. There's an appeal. Where is it leading to? Nowhere. At the end of the day, we now have the rigmaroles of litigation in court. I mean,
and now the Nigerian justice system give the opportunity for you to appeal and then even take your case up to the Supreme Court, which will even, if it happens, it's buying more time, and then the students are suffering. So
that ultimately tells you that, I mean, government has to go back to the negotiation
table. So it is government that needs to bow at this point.
Yes, please. They need to bow, go back to the negotiation table, try to see how they can make some concessions, and more importantly, demonstrate willingness to implement those agreements, because over time, I think it's not just an issue of the agreement. It's an issue of implementation. Giving life to the agreements that are reached has always been the major problem that ASU has had with the federal government. I think that is even what has led us to where we are today.
All right, so I understand that there are provisions in the Constitution that guarantees the right to protest, and there are also provisions in the law that also guarantees that you can actually go for industrial actions. But then, are there provisions stating how much or the length, how lengthy that strike or industrial action should last, and at what point each party should sheath their sword?
Well, I think as regards the time in which the strike should last, I don't think there are stipulations as to how long a strike should last. But the stipulations we have, just like it was in the case before the National Industrial Court, is situations where union should call off their strike, when they go on strike, or when they should suspend the strike. Of course, when you look at the Section 18 of the Trade Dispute Act, as was cited in the current case of HASU, of course, when a dispute has been referred to the National Industrial Court, for example, amongst other situations that are listed in that section, a strike ought to be suspended. So those situations are only the times when, if, for example, you've gone on strike, you have to suspend that strike within that time. But our laws do not make express provision as to how long a strike should last. But, I mean, in reality, I think our concern should not always be about how long a strike should last. Our concern should be how to tackle the concerns
so we don't even go through
that lead to these strike actions. Because, I mean, when you now pay attention to how long a strike is going to last, it's almost saying that, okay, just go on strike. We'll allow you go on strike. Whatever you're saying is not our business. After all, after this time, you will call off the strike. But okay. I mean, well, let's have situations. Let our country be more progressive in nature. Let it be a situation of us paying attention to the process that leads to the strike in the first place. What are the concerns that leads to this strike? And then government takes steps to see how, I mean, they put up measures that will forestall the outbreak of strikes, so that, I mean, we do not have situations where the students, as it is the case now, suffer a greater part of the effect that this strike will have on our society.
Just like they say, when two elephants are fighting, the grants are the ones that suffers it. Now, this move appeared to be the last resort to be employed by the federal government in a bid to end the prolonged strike. But my question is it actually right to use the legal means or to resolve this kind of quagmire, or are there other diplomatical means that they can use, even though they're already in court? Are there other diplomatical means that they could actually employ to resolve this?
Yes, of course they are. Like I said, it all boils down to renegotiating the terms of agreement, and beyond renegotiating, taking steps to see how, I mean, they can implement. It's the implementation that has always been the problem. Because I've said that while the matter is in court, it is still the normal litigation process. And of course, we know what litigation is like. Filing of processes, adjournments may come when necessary. And as the situation unfolds, you see other realities coming up with the matter in court. And the end point is that the students are still at home suffering. So beyond the litigation, just like I've said, government should go back to the negotiation table. I think some of these concerns as to the increment of salaries for the lecturers, concerns as to funding of our university system. These are concerns that, I mean, they can reach a common ground. Like I said, I think it's because they've tried not to bring out terms that are balanced somehow. Because while ASU says, okay, give us, we want you to use a payment system that is different from yours. And they're also saying this is the percentage of what we want for increase of salaries. There's a way they can reach a common ground. If, for example,
even though some people have actually argued that you cannot tell your employer how they should pay you.
Of course, you can't, but in situations like this, that's why we have situations like this in labor disputes allows for negotiation of working conditions between the employer and the trade union, and in this case, ASU. So what they do is just to they renegotiate the working conditions to see how, I mean, the working conditions will be much more favorable to the employee and even to the employer in some instances. So it's not a situation of saying that you are the one who is now actually telling them. Government also has a negotiation power, negotiating power on the table. And so it all boils down to what they are proposing, what they are bringing to the table, and beyond bringing something to the table, as I will always say, a strong demonstration of implementation is what needs to drive home whatever they are going to agree, and of course give us the assurance that in the end of the day, I mean, even if they call off the strike, they will have their demands met.
Now, there have been various allegations that Nigeria justice system usually favors every first plaintiff. So maybe that's why you get this kind of judgment from the industrial court. A lot of people have said that as long as you're the first person to go and complain, you will definitely get, like, you should just believe that your side of the story will be heard more than the defendant. Do you agree to that argument?
Well, I will not agree with that. I do not agree with that, because the nature of our justice system is such that the judge is an impartial arbiter. I mean, the judge, his job is simply to sit listen to both sides, marshal out their case.
Even if we are not just apart from looking at it with the ASU federal government tussle, even looking at it in terms of politics and then politicians and then elections, would you actually say that that argument is not or is tenable?
The argument is still not tenable because a cardinal principle, regardless of the nature of the dispute that is brought to the court, a cardinal principle that plays a vital role in our judicial system is the principle of fair hearing. The court has a responsibility, of course, in line with Section 36 of our Constitution, to give listening ear to both parties. And of course, the law does not say, oh, because the person is a plaintiff, the court will listen to him more than the other person. The law says give equal opportunities to both parties to marshal out their cases. And so whether or not the person is going to be given judgment will be dependent on the quality of arguments that are made before the court. Because like we always say, the court is not a Father Christmas that will just grant you what you did not ask for. And so what is expected of every litigant, whether you're the plaintiff or defendant, is that when you go to court, you should be able to tell a persuasive story to the court, marshal out credible arguments before the court on why the court should either give judgment in your favor or do not grant the prayers as made by the opposing party. But I mean, in the end, the point is that our justice system is not tailored towards favoring the person who brings the matter to court. Our justice system is towards ensuring that justice is done. And justice means that both parties are heard, and based on the quality of evidence, arguments made before the court will give its judgment or decision on it. Yeah.
All right, so even as our time is fast spent, now the National Association of Nigerian Student NANS has threatened to stage a massive protest, especially in the South, and they said that it will be worse than the #EndSARS protest if the strike by the ASU and federal government still lingers. And then NAS said it would make good use that its threats to cripple the economy if the federal government fails to return lecturers to their classroom. Now, do we actually need a resurgence of the #EndSARS protest at this moment?
Well, let me say that first, the right to peaceful assembly is one that is guaranteed under our Constitution. Of course, everybody has a right to gather peacefully, air out their opinions without necessarily having to vandalize government properties and properties of private individuals. And so if with the current realities on ground, I mean, I do not hold any opposing view as to the fact that NANS should not demonstrate. They should. I mean, 7 months is not 1 day, it's not even 7 days. 7 months of being at home, having your hopes dashed out. Then for those who already had their lives planned out for a particular period of time, they realize that they are even readjusting. It tells you a whole lot about what Nigerian students are going through. And so if it would take a demonstration, I mean a strong demonstration by NANS to make the government give listening ears to the demands of ASU, I think that should happen. Because
you actually know that the sound of #EndSARS can actually put a lot of shiver in a lot of people's spine, especially politicians and business people.
Yeah, actually, issues of the EndSARS, I mean, where the team became very uncomfortable was when, I mean, they began to vandalize government property. And that is something that, I mean, is a discussion for another day. But like I said, as regards NANS, for as long as the demonstration is peaceful, is one that is geared towards ensuring that they can press home their demands, make government listen to their concerns. I mean, we saw what happened in Lagos State. I mean, they didn't vandalize, but I mean, the economic discomfort they are going to cause to the government is something that will send a very strong message. And if, of course, we have a NANS government that is willing to ensure that government lives up to expectation, I mean, I will applaud them to do so. Because we've seen that in the history of this country, student leadership structures such as NANS has played a very vital role for us to get to where we are. I mean, the independence struggle and even take over government from the military down to a democratic system of government. We've seen the critical role that student leadership structures play. And so even in the 21st century, such as we find ourselves, we still have concerns as to the fact that, I mean, students are kept at home for over 7 months and government is doing little or nothing about it. Then, I mean, I see nothing wrong with those who are critical stakeholders, who are even the ones who are suffering from these concerns, coming out to make their demands heard by government and to ensure that by all means possible, legally possible, government addresses those concerns so that they can go back to class. And let me also say that beyond them, of course, showing that demonstration of willingness to go on protest if government fails to do something to address the current realities on ground. I think that there's a whole lot that needs to be done. And like we've seen in times past where, I mean, the NANS leadership will start on a good footing and in the end of the day, they may lose focus. It is my prayer that they do not lose focus, because with the realities on ground, bearing in mind the 2023 elections that is at stake, I think we need everybody's hand on deck. We need the hands of NANS comrades on deck to ensure that government live up to its expectations. And of course, even as we prepare for the 2023 election, let the politicians, let the elites know that, I mean, they can't do anything and get away with it. And then once they know that institutions such as the student leadership structure that is made up of vibrant youth of our country are up to the task of nation building, they are very ready to ensure that the whole government are accountable. I think it will go a long way to, I mean, make our society a better place and to always keep every government on its toes.
And we always take social media message, but we'll not have the time to bother. Someone was actually saying that when it affects the elites, that's when they begin to move. Like some people have actually stated that because it is not touching, when the problem or when the challenge, I went to the airport, you actually see how all of them would come out to complain. But maybe when you have this protest, maybe that will be the move that they might have. Now, what are your last words? Even as we we're looking into 2023 election, and we're still commemorating Nigeria at 62, and then you have politicians. Campaigns have started already, and then you have politicians who will come out to say, okay, this ASU federal government tussle in my own administration, you would never see it happen again. So Nigerian students who have been at home for 7 months, what are those things that they should be looking out for, so that when you want to put your thumb where your mouth is in 2023 to vote, this should be the things that you should look out for and say, no, I am not going to pick this person. This is the person that I should pick.
Well, I think as we make our way towards the 2023 election, let me say that it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that our country's leadership has been one that has casted so much doubt on itself. I mean, we have a situation where politicians make certain promises during the campaigns and they end up not fulfilling most of them. And these things happen to be the most essential part of why we are in existence as Nigerians. And so as we prepare for the 2023 election, bearing in mind our subject of discussion for today, the educational sector, I think that the young persons need to realize their place in nation building. I mean, with the current realities, the fact that for over 7 months they've been at home, they do not need a soothsayer to come and tell them that if nothing is done now or in 2023 as the case may be, I mean, it may be very difficult for us to take back our country. And so it leaves us with, I mean, doing everything possible to ensure that we vote the right leaders when the time comes for voting. I mean, even as we prepare for the 2023 elections, I think that the current government has a whole lot to do. I mean, we already know they have aspirants to in the elections. I mean, the burden they have to discharge is simply the burden of telling Nigerians how well they've been able to manage the affairs of this country for the past 8 years that will entitle them to another 4 years
to continue
in government. Yes. And
all
so
right.
how well they're able to discharge that burden, I think, is something that some of us are looking forward to, because, I mean, you can't ignore the current realities on ground. You can't ignore the ASU strike when you're talking about the educational sector. And if you're talking as a presidential candidate, for example, of the APC, you should be able to tell us how you're going to manage issues of ASU strike, bearing in mind the fact that, I mean, these things have happened in a government run by you people, and little or nothing has been done to address this issue. So Nigerians, young persons, as much as we prepare for the 2020 election, they should walk by their conviction. They should be able to look at candidates who have what it takes to run the affairs of this country. And it's unfortunate that, I mean, we are not endowed with clairvoyant proclivities, that we can tell what tomorrow looks like, what the intentions of a person is all about. I mean, even the learned doctor has once said that not even the devil knows what is the intention of another person. But we hope. We hope, because that is always what we always make recourse to. We hope that, I mean, in 2023, we should be able to, I mean, make decisions that reflect what we hope to see in our dear country.
Awesome. What a fine place to end this conversation. Thank you so much for your time with us. Etaba Agbor, it's been a wonderful time having this talk with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, guests, viewers, that's where we draw the curtain on this edition of The Conversation. We have been chatting with Etaba Agbor. He is a public affairs analyst. And I'll see you again next time. Keep watching The Conversation, because you never know who my next guest will be and what my next topic will be all about. Whatever you do, please stay safe. Till I come your way again from the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Annabelle Oji. God bless Nigeria.